So, today we're diving into this incredible story about four princes who get offered a kingdom and they actually turn it down. It's a pretty wild tale of faith and sacrifice, and it all boils down to one really powerful question. I mean, really think about it. You're offered the throne, all the power, all the wealth of an entire kingdom, and you say, no thanks. That's exactly the choice these four princes, the sons of a king named Mosiah, made. So why? What on earth could possibly be more important than wearing a crown?
Well, instead of becoming kings, these four guys, Ammon, Aaron, Omner, and Himni, chose a totally different path. They decided to become missionaries. And get this, they embarked on a 14-year mission. I mean, think about that for a second. 14 years to go preach to the people who hated them the most, the Lamanites. This wasn't just a tough choice. It was, by all accounts, a crazy, seemingly impossible one.
Okay, so to really get what a huge deal this was, you have to understand the history here. The Nephites and Lamanites had been at each other's throats for a long, long time. This slide kind of lays out the stark contrast, at least from the Nephite point of view, right? They saw themselves as these faithful, scripture-reading people, while the Lamanites were seen as this ferocious, warlike people who, delighted in conflict. So these princes were willingly walking right into the hornet's nest, hoping to change hearts that seemed completely set in stone.
All right, so the mission kicks off, and the brothers all split up, each going to a different part of the Lamanite territory. We're going to follow the story of just one of them, a prince named Ammon. He heads into the land of Ishmael all by himself, and, big surprise, he's immediately captured and hauled before the local king, a man named Lamoni.
So King Lamoni is actually pretty impressed with Ammon. He offers to let him marry one of his daughters. Now, this was a massive deal. A royal marriage would have given him protection, influence, basically an easy street. But Ammon turns it down flat. Instead, he makes this unbelievably humble request. Nay, but I will be thy servant. He's basically choosing to earn influence through service, not just by being handed a title.
So, just like that, a prince becomes a servant. And he's not given some cushy palace job. Nope, he's sent out to do one of the most basic jobs you can imagine, guarding the king's sheep at a watering hole. And it's right here, in this humble spot, a million miles from any throne, that Ammon is about to face his first real test. A gang of local raiders shows up and does what they always do. They attack and scatter the king's precious flocks. Now, this was a serious problem because losing the king's sheep often meant you'd lose your life. So the other servants, they just start freaking out, weeping because they're sure King Lamoni is going to have them all executed. But Ammon? Totally calm. He doesn't see a disaster, he sees an opportunity. He tells the terrified servants, hey, you guys go round up the sheep while he goes to deal with the attackers, all by himself.
And what happens next is just shocking. The raiders come at Ammon with their clubs, but they are no match for him at all. The record says that for every guy who tried to hit him, Ammon smote off their arms with his sword. He doesn't just go in and slaughter everyone, though. He takes out their leader, but for the others, it's a really strategic move. He disables them with this overwhelming show of force, proving his loyalty and his power in a way that no words ever could.
Then comes the real kicker. The other servants actually gather up the severed arms and take them to King Lamoni as proof, as a testimony of what this new guy just did. And the king's reaction? Well, let's just say astonished is putting it mildly. He's completely blown away. So this incredibly violent but super effective act, it totally sets the stage for something completely different. Ammon's display of power has just shattered the king's whole worldview and opened his mind to a kind of strength he just can't explain. And this right here, this is the king's gut reaction. He just can't wrap his head around how a normal servant could do something like that. In his world, there's only one possible explanation. This guy has to be the Great Spirit, their supreme God who has come down to visit them. So, Ammon, seeing his chance, jumps right in and starts teaching the king about his God. And the effect is immediate and completely overwhelming. The king is so powerfully struck by this message that after he says a prayer for mercy, he just collapses, looking for all the world like he's dead. And he stays like that for 2 whole days and 2 nights. Now, while the king's just lying there, some of his servants are saying, he's dead, we gotta go bury him. But his wife, the queen, she has this feeling, this faith that he's okay. She calls for Ammon and says this really famous, kind of weird line. Basically, he doesn't stink. She's saying, I know he's not dead. Something else is going on. She trusts her gut and asks Ammon for help. So Ammon tells her, don't worry, he's not dead, he's just overcome by the Spirit of God. And sure enough, just as he says, the king wakes up.
He stands up, declares that he's seen his Redeemer, and is so filled with joy that he collapses all over again. Then the queen collapses, then Ammon, then every single servant in the room. It's like this spiritual chain reaction that just sweeps through the whole palace.
Okay, so this conversion, it doesn't just stop at the palace doors. Not even close. Thanks to the hard work of Ammon and his brothers, who are all out there on their own missions, thousands of Lamanites end up being converted. And to show how much they've changed, they take on a new name to separate themselves from their old ways. They call themselves the Anti-Nephi-Lehies.
And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures how they're feeling. Their king gives this incredible speech, saying that God has washed away the stain of all their past violence, making their swords bright and clean again. And he begs them to promise to never, ever stain those swords with blood again.
So, to really lock in this promise, they do something absolutely radical. They gather up every single weapon they have, every sword, every bow, everything, and they bury them deep in the earth. They make a solemn promise, a covenant with God, that they would rather let themselves be killed than ever kill another person again.
Well, you just know that kind of covenant is going to be tested, right? And it's tested in the most brutal way you can imagine. An army of Lamanites who hadn't converted, furious about this change, comes marching in with one goal: to wipe them all out.
But what do these people of peace do? They don't dig up their swords. They don't even try to run. Instead, as this angry army gets closer, they just walk out to meet them, fall to their knees, and they start to pray.
And with absolutely no one fighting back, the Lamanite army just starts killing them. 1,005 of them are killed, just like that. Cut down while they're praying, holding true to their promise of nonviolence.
But then, in the middle of this horror, something absolutely unbelievable happens. The soldiers, the attackers, they see their own people refusing to fight back, praising God as they're literally being killed, and they are just hit with this overwhelming wave of guilt and remorse. They are so shocked by what they're doing that more than 1,000 of the attackers throw down their own weapons right there on the spot and join the people of peace.
So, what happens to this community that was born out of such a dramatic, terrible sacrifice? Well, their story doesn't end there on that bloody field.
The survivors, the people of Anti-Nephi-Lehies, are led away to safety, and they're taken in by the Nephites, their sworn enemies, who give them their own land and promise to protect them with their armies. And so this community, later called the people of Ammon, was able to keep their sacred oath to never shed blood again for the rest of their days.
And that really brings us back to the big idea here. This whole story pushes this timeless question about conviction and conflict right in your face. In a world full of swords and violence, this group chose to lay down their weapons for good. And in what looked like their weakest moment, they won a victory that violence never could have. Which leaves us with this huge question. Is a covenant of peace more powerful than a weapon?